Hi, I would like to start by thanking the selection committee and my nominators for the incredible honor of receiving the Jeff Elman Award for Scientific Achievement and Community Building. I had the pleasure of meeting Jeff in 2008 when I was interviewing for a job in his department, Cognitive Science at UCSD, but unfortunately we didn't get to talk very much. It was around the same time that at a different institution I almost lost a job offer because of my activism. What happened was that I had already received a verbal offer and I was on my second visit and it went pretty well. I was back in my hotel and suddenly the chair called saying that they wanted to talk to me the next morning. That's pretty unusual. So I went and they said, Weiji, I've heard some concerns that you are doing a lot of extracurricular activities and maybe because of that you will be a better fit elsewhere. Wow, that was pretty shocking. And what they meant was most likely that I had been very open about the work that I had been doing for the Rural China Education Foundation, this nonprofit that I had started to help promote student-centered teaching in rural China. Now, you could argue that that is very far away from my academic work, and maybe it's legitimate to think that this might be a distraction. But I also think that lots of academic scientists believe that you have to live and breathe science and be 100% dedicated to your research in order to be a good scientist. And where does that leave outreach and advocacy and activism? So I'm hoping to learn about that question with you, and what better place to start than in my own local community here, where over the years I've gotten to know many great scientists who also are very inspiring in terms of outreach, advocacy, and activism. So let's go talk to a couple of them. Hey, Heather.
Hi.
Would you mind telling me a bit how you got into outreach?
Sure. So I got into outreach in grad school. One of my friends asked me to do a classroom visit with her. It was maybe a little bit of arm twisting the first time, but that was the last time she had to ask me to do it. After that, it was always volunteering. We were up at Columbia Medical School, and so being in a neighborhood where there were lots of opportunities to go into schools that were underserved and maybe didn't have the science education that we wished they had, and would bring the brains from the neuroanatomy class and just really have a lot of fun talking to the usually middle schoolers and elementary school students.
In some cases, science can directly inform policy. And I'm a member of the Scientist Action and Advocacy Network, where we're trying to do that by partnering with nonprofit organizations working on social justice or environmental issues, and trying to provide them with fact sheets, literature reviews, data visualizations, etc. And one of my colleagues in that organization is Ali Cohen.
I'm Ali Cohen, and I'm a postdoc at NYU, and I'm a developmental cognitive neuroscientist. And broadly, I'm interested in how emotion and motivation influence learning and memory and the underlying neural mechanisms across age. We first started working with Raise the Age. At the time, the age of treating teenagers as adults in the court was 16. So the goal of the Raise the Age movement was to raise the age to 18 for criminal responsibility. And so we collated a bunch of scientific evidence to suggest that teenagers are different from adults, and therefore they should be treated that way in the eyes of the law. We've since also done similar things for Miranda rights, trying to take a developmentally informed approach to how we read kids' Miranda rights and how the law approaches that.
One form of science communication is to write about scientific topics for general audiences. And at NYU, like in many other places, we have this group called NeuWrite, where scientists come together with writers and journalists to workshop pieces for general audiences. And one of the pieces that we workshopped that way in recent years was very impressive.
My name is Simone Sun. I am a graduate student at NYU at the Center for Neuroscience. That article was titled "Stop Using Phony Science to Justify Transphobia." And so it was an article that I felt needed to be written about what the science of sex really is. You know, there's a lot of anti-trans sentiment right now in the public sphere and within our political conversations. And very often there is this argument that's brought up that trans people are against science, as if, like our existence is non-biological because of the way we choose and need to express our gender and or sex. And so I felt like there needed to be an article sort of providing the actual research that underlies things like sexual traits and sexual dimorphism.
I got involved with the Dana Foundation and their Brain Bee, and we had an event to bring in high schoolers that were going to participate in the Brain Bee and teach them a little bit more about what they would be competing about, but also what it was really like to be in a lab. So going beyond the Brain Facts book. And that really gave me an opportunity to see what it was like to organize at a higher level, to interact with people that I still have relationships with today at the Dana Foundation through Brain Awareness Week events, and to really create an amazing network of people. And it became clear that it was maybe something that I like to do beyond the lab and invest more time in. Some of my favorite time is actually with the Bio Bus, which is basically the Magic School Bus. It is a bus that has been converted into a mobile lab. We have parked on 125th Street, sort of in the heart of Harlem, for the past number of years. Actually, missing it for 2 years in a row for COVID has been really sad. But those opportunities where people are just strolling down the street, going to the Dunkin' Donuts to get coffee in the morning, and they see brains on the street and we're able to interact with them.
So this is our bench card that we created for judges, just as sort of a checklist for them to have with them to stop and think when they're interacting with youth, like, how is this child different than an adult that I might be used to interacting with? And what should I think about as I'm interacting with the defendant that's in front of me? And then we've also created these infographics. So there's one common piece to the infographics, which has sort of a summary of the science, with the main takeaways being teens are not small adults by any behavioral or neural measures. Context is critical when assessing how teenagers behave and how their brain responds to different situations that they're in. And that also adolescence, or this transitional phase of development, is really this time of unique vulnerability and opportunity where we can try and sort of set people up to have the best possible experiences and to ultimately become like a healthy, contributing member of society.
A member of Congress tweeted about your piece.
Yes, Ted Lieu, and I thought that was that was really, really nice. But the scenario in which it has been needed is also very scary. So like, while I am enjoying this new publicity, it makes me even more of a target.
What is hard about doing this kind of outreach?
A few things, I guess. One is, how receptive is the audience going to be? So generally speaking, judges and defense attorneys seem to be quite receptive, whereas prosecutors are a little bit less receptive. So you sort of have to, in any science communication, you have to really think about your audience, as you know. And so when you're thinking about potentially having an adversarial audience, that adds another layer of complexity in terms of building the arguments that you're making and making everything not only accessible, but also as compelling as possible to different people who might have wildly different viewpoints.
These are opportunities to use our background as scientists and to do something meaningful and to give back to society. You must be getting a lot of faculty participating.
Yeah, that would be lovely, but it's definitely not true that faculty are getting involved as much as I would like.
As a student or as a postdoc, you're still building your own career, but tenured faculty, they really don't have an excuse, right? So in these SCAN meetings, it must be full of tenured faculty participating, right?
Not really.
So faculty don't participate a lot themselves in outreach, advocacy, and activism. But do they at least support their trainees?
My advisor was supportive.
I've been really fortunate to have very supportive advisors throughout my graduate school and postdoc journeys. I know others that I have worked with have not been so fortunate. And when I've talked to people who have encountered resistance from their advisors or others to do this work, I try to help them pitch the various skills that they'll be getting in that way to hopefully try and change someone's mind, maybe with mixed success.
It's often seen by heads of departments as something that should be put on the back burner until someone has time to do it. And, time is very precious.
Why would it be that faculty don't participate a lot in community building and outreach, and in some cases don't even support their trainees? Perhaps the answer is simple.
Tenure.
If, someone is on the tenure clock, this is not going to be something that's prioritized for them. So it might be something that has to fall to the wayside, even if it's something that they feel really passionately about.
Is that a fault of the professors? No, they have to do what they have to do in order to succeed, right?
Heather, Ali, and Simone are correct, because what counts for tenure and promotion, at least at most major research universities, are papers, grants, that you show up for teaching, and that you serve on committees. What doesn't count is pretty much everything else: high quality teaching, high quality mentoring, outreach activities, writing about science for general audiences, advocating for science funding, promoting science-based policies, or efforts to improve diversity, equity, and inclusion. In other words, community building or serving the public. You can be an extremely successful academic scientist without doing any community building. And is that really what we want? I'm not saying that these things are not appreciated. And in fact, I've been very lucky with colleagues who truly care. But there's a difference between a form of work being tolerated or informally appreciated and a formal recognition that that work is crucial to the overall academic mission. We've talked about expectations for academic scientists, but expectations follow values. So what does it say about the values of academic science that outreach, advocacy, and activism do not get formally recognized? Could it be that we think of a real scientist as somebody who is singularly research-focused, apolitical, and a pure professional? When the department chair, whom I mentioned in the beginning, tried to dissuade me from accepting their job offer, I was pretty upset, and I expressed that. I said that there is no reason to believe that my activism in my free time would compromise my science. And they backed off, and things were fine after that. But this emphasizes to me that scientists, especially junior scientists, constantly have to fight this battle of showing that they are legit scientists, even though they also are interested in reaching broader audiences or turning science into policy.
I am 100% research dedicated, and then I put the 10 whatever other percent of my personal life into these things. It would be nice if there were more of a balance, but I think that you prioritize the things that are important to you.
I wasn't necessarily directly told that it was too political, but it was certainly something that was outside of the realm of what I would be expected to do as a graduate student. This isn't sort of directly related to my research. The only reason it's related to me is because of my identity, because I am trans, and I also happen to be in science.
I've always struggled to find the balance between being a scientist and being an activist. I actually never felt that I was 100% a scientist. And when I was a postdoc, I wrote this essay about how I'd rather be an just okay scientist who still does a lot of activism on the side than the most celebrated scientist in the world, but to have to give this activism up. Where do we go from here? We have to both balance the expectations and rethink our values. Let's start with the expectations. Awards for community building, such as the Elman Prize, are fantastic but can only go so far. Not everyone who deserves an award can win one. Awards are unlikely to fully make up for skewed expectations at the university level. To support balanced expectations, we could create staff positions or offer faculty teaching relief for community building and science-based outreach. We could offer additional funding to PhD students and postdocs who are active in these areas. But perhaps most importantly, we could make community building and science-based outreach an integral part of tenure and promotion review, perhaps by introducing a broader impacts category similar to that section in NSF grants.
Perhaps it's just a matter of figuring out how to balance all of those things, that not everyone has to do every single component of teaching and grantsmanship and outreach and advocacy and writing and every single thing, but I think everyone can do some of those. And so valuing the people who do outreach and advocacy for what it brings to our scientific community is really important.
There's precedent for what Heather is suggesting. For example, at Ulster University, in order to get promoted, You have to exceed the expectations of your current position in at least 2 of 3 areas: teaching, research and impact, and civic and institutional contribution. This third category includes activities related to outreach and community building. Rethinking our values is going to be the harder part.
I think academics should care about outreach because it is the public who are funding the work that we're doing, and they deserve to know what we're doing. But it's also really important that we have their trust and their understanding. And I think COVID has really shown us that if the scientists aren't the ones who are engaging the public in sharing the work that we're doing and what it means to be a scientist, what the scientific process is like, what we're learning in our labs, then we're going to be behind the 8 ball and we're going to be the ones who are catching up to the narrative. So I think it's really important that we are the ones who are talking about our own work.
It's one thing to sort of put a sentence at the end of your discussion about what the relevance of your science is for policy or for some kind of greater good. And it's another thing to sort of make sure that these ideas get out there and permeate society, and to try and take, well-established bodies of research that people have been conducting for decades and summarize this to audiences that can then in turn use that information in order to enact new policies or procedures. But I do think that these efforts are really synergistic because you're challenged to think in a totally different way about the science and about what the applications of the science are, and to sort of extend yourself a bit beyond your comfort zone. And I think that these different ways of thinking can help inform the way you approach your research and the way you approach writing and talking about your research with other people. If we just reframe the way we think about what the function of science communication and outreach is as a scientist, hopefully then it would be more appreciated moving forward.
It's more so that, the institutions that have been built up around academia, who is allowed to do scientific research, what kind of scientific questions are being asked, who gets funding, who is supported in their journey, their career or their academic journey. Academia isn't built to sort of deal with the political relevance of science. It's something that's often left to the side. You do have to do primary research in order to have a career as an academic scientist. And so if you don't do that, then you're not actively engaging in academia, even though what I am doing is very relevant and important for science. So I think it's up to us to really come together and fix this,
I have many people to thank. First, my mom, who was my first role model as an activist. Of my mentors, 2 were particularly supportive of my extracurricular activities: Erik Verlinde, one of my PhD advisors, and Alex Pouget, one of my postdoc advisors. I would like to thank Christina Alberini for starting Growing Up in Science with me, many generations of lab members for making me a better scientist and a better mentor. Of my students, special thanks to Will, Jen, and Jonathan for being my partners in crime in a lot of activism and outreach. Janneke, Jaël, Will, Dale, and Ronald, thank you for your friendship and for speaking in this symposium. Ronald also for organizing. Heather, Ali, and Simone for being the stars of my talk today. Of course, the Cognitive Science Society and the Elman Prize Selection Committee. And finally, Todd Korekis, who did all the camera work and who taught me how to edit videos. And now I'd love to hear your thoughts and questions and discuss what we can do together. Thank you.